They need our answers.
They need
I
our
just
answers.
wanted that in the recording.
Welcome to the latest episode of Authenticated with your host, Kate McLeod. I am intrigued by people. People watching, I love. People learning, that's where I'm insatiably curious. I'm interested in the why and how of the creative mind's pattern of thinking, the subtext to the creative thinker, or in its more conscious and malleable form, the creative conscious. Because when you are so clear on yourself via the triad of consciousnesses, then you become reflective to others. Meeting yourself is an infectious practice because what feels good is infectious and something I think we could all use a good dose of. So join me in conversations with a diverse arsenal of creative thinkers, from artists to entrepreneurs to serial thinkers ready to optimize their creative conscious. With me, self-made and self-proclaimed creative entrepreneur. Sounds hot, right? Hi, Kayla.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
I am fantastical. Well, one, I'm here with you, so then my
Yeah.
day is made.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for being here again. And
Ooh,
so
I
soon, too.
I'm truly honored, really, truly. This is conversations with you are like one of my favorite pastimes already, so
I know,
the more the
honestly,
better.
it's what makes the friendship so good. Because
Mhm.
it's just like, I feel like every single time we hang out and talk, it's like days after.
Mhm.
I am just still noodling, still thinking, and like you are someone who, and this is a testament to the kind of like friends that we need in our lives. Is like we need people in our lives who are not only interested in them representing their best selves, but they're also equally invested in their friends representing them best
Mm.
selves.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
actually, I think this is kind of perfect because you and I planned to do this capture 2 days ago.
Mhm.
And then we
Yeah.
had a tech issue, and I was flustered. And then at the end of us figuring out the tech issue, you said, I would imagine that you might be a little flustered right now, which maybe isn't the best brain space for us to do this. Do you want to do this later?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then we figured it out, we got all the tech out of the way, and yes, we need to, like, hold space for your brain.
Yes, exactly. And also like how you show up too. And it was the perfect start to this episode specifically, where we're going to focus on the themes of pivoting and adapting,
Mm.
because it
Yes.
gave me the opportunity to not only continue to think more about the episode, but it also gave me the idea for this new setup
Mhm. Yeah.
where it's like, oh, okay, actually, now that that's out of the way, it gave my brain space to actually get more ideas and be more in line with who I am as a creative thinker.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the, like, hints and signs, as I'm thinking about it, the hints and signs of your brain, like, not having creative ideas or not having vision or not having, like, that freedom of play and variation is, like, one of the signs that you need to, like, take a step back and then
Oh my
allow
God.
it to have that, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that to me, that sounds like ease, patience,
Mm.
right?
Yes. So much is coming up for me right now because I'm in such a place of learning new skills. And you said patience, my body went, "Ugh." Like, but really, truly, that is what it is. And I think patience, and in the form of just like compassion of so often, like if you think about your tech example, your brain, I think I remember being like, if you feel stressy, like maybe, and it's
Yeah.
like we don't often I don't know who does, and I think I maybe said this exact same thing on the last podcast, but that negative feeling doesn't usually give people their best ideas, their best creativity, or anything like that. So when we're in this heightened stress or this heightened overwhelm, we often don't then produce what we want to or need to. Like it's a total block. And so that's one of those signs to be able to be like, okay, give myself compassion and say, it's okay I'm stressed out about this tech issue, or it's okay that all this new learning I'm doing since I started a YouTube channel is overwhelming my brain and making it feel at capacity. Like, of course, it's brand new, it's different, it's hard for you, it's something you're learning. So it's like the compassion first, and now it's okay to be patient. It's okay to say, you can learn something new. And remember, how long did it take you to walk? I don't know, months. So it's okay.
Years. Like,
You're, yeah.
maybe for some, you never know. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know the baby at all, but
Yeah, I think it's usually like 12 to 16 months or something like that, but
right.
there is a year and that is a year.
Mhm, but also, how long did it take us to learn a language?
Oh, yeah.
And
Mhm.
I think about this idea all the time too, because even though we learn things, we've known things for a long time, we always have to adapt and pivot our relationship with those things. Like I think
Mm,
about all the time how the first word that we learn as kids and the first concept we really learn as kids is no. And
mm,
think about the trials and tribulations of your relationship with no throughout the duration of your life so far.
mm. That's so funny because for me, it I have I don't know how to say this other than I disagree. I don't think that's the first word.
Oh my god, what do you think it is?
Okay, maybe where my body is going with that is I hope that is not the first word. Because as you were just about to go, like, think
Oh,
about your relationship with no, and it's like it cuts you off so much and it closes down so much. And I think my education background in me is like I
yeah.
was very specific. There's a lot of words when I was teaching that kind of went into the word graveyard, words that I didn't use.
Mm,
No wasn't really one of them in terms of allowance or something like that. Like I would use no if somebody said, "Do you like donuts?" Then I'd say no, right?
yeah.
And even then I wouldn't. I would always give an explanation because I just think that when we speak to kids in such a finite way, and we're going somewhere totally different, but when we speak to kids in such a finite way, it cuts off their learning. And so
Mm.
and for anybody and growth for anybody, like I rarely just answer with one word because how can you learn from that? So, my body just went my brain went somewhere totally different when you said that. So, ask the question again.
Okay. Well, no, actually, I'm kind of liking this.
Okay.
I'm kind of liking this because I understand exactly what you're saying, where no used to be this bad thing, and my relationship with no now is very empowering because I
Okay.
have no problem saying no now. And for me, I perceive no as information of like, no, I don't like that. And I guess also specifically in terms of no, I mean our no,
Okay, versus receiving
receiving a no.
no. Yeah, and I saw it in terms of gathering information and exploratory in the childhood age versus yes, no for us is like I know both you and I and our partners right now are all
Mhm.
practicing like intentionality. And so
Yes.
being able to say intentionally no to something versus saying yes to everything or accepting it and not like standing your ground and going towards what your goals are towards. And
Mm.
so yeah, I guess there's just the variations, the angles and the perspectives.
Yeah, but I do really enjoy your perspective from the teaching, from the learning, from
Mhm.
actually educating young minds.
Yeah, but I don't think that in reverse, the way that you're talking about it doesn't do that in reverse. It's not like a shut down no to somebody else's like hope and dream, right?
Yes.
It's something different. It's an empowerment of your hope and dream. And the way that you're phrasing it is not that you are shutting down someone else's learning, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was my first entry into understanding when I started to have the thoughts about, like, how do we adapt and how do we pivot? It's like, I just thought about that because it used to be such a scary word, and now it's, like, the best thing
mhm,
to say. It's like,
yes. Yeah.
and it just mean it because it's just, like, I know so much about myself that that doesn't align with me actually, but, like, thank you.
Well, and that's why it's scary though. That's why you grew up thinking it was scary because every time someone told it to you, it shut you down. So we didn't know
Yeah.
at a young age how to use it in an empowering way. So we're actually kind of saying the exact same thing. It's just the evolution of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I really, really like that. Okay, so in this, there is a question that we have from oh, yeah, we have questions. We
From
have
our
questions,
viewership.
viewership, and fans, and some comments too on posts. It's making me so happy. This thing is growing, Kayla. It is making me so happy.
I
So
love that so much, honestly, because that's the purpose, right? Our purpose is just we don't well, we maybe do like to hear ourselves talk, but that's not the purpose of why we're recording it. We get to hear each other
no.
talk all the time. We're recording it because we really do believe these ideas and thoughts are beneficial for the world, and they're things that have opened up our brains so much, so how could they not help someone else? So I'm so glad that that's
Yeah.
how it's being received and people are enjoying it.
People are really enjoying it. I've had some, like, friends give me some really, really deep compliments about it, and,
Mm,
one friend specifically last night was like talking to me, "You're such a good interviewer." And I was like, "You're not the first person to say that." But what surprises me about that is I thought that was kind of apparent.
mm.
And I knew that, and she was like, "Oh, well, now I do too." And I was like, "Oh, wow."
Well, but I think it's different when you think about it in the formality of a podcast. Like when you are with you in real life, you are a very good interviewer because you're just like very conversational. You have questions, you're curious. And I didn't really think about it either in terms of because I've had a similar compliment, surprise.
Good.
Um, but I didn't really realize it until I listened to a podcast with really bad interviewers where it's like you could tell they have a list of questions. They ask the question, the person answers it. They do not engage with the answer. They ask the next question. I'm like, that is not interesting
No,
at
I
all.
don't find that interesting, and also it's like, I was reluctant to get these questions ahead of time from other people because I don't like that format where
Yeah.
I have an idea, I have a framework, but I'm open to it looking so different, which is the exciting part.
Mhm. Which I believe it probably already looks different than what you had planned. So
It
there you
does look
go.
different than what I planned, but I love that. That part is, like, so exciting. So from Michael, fear is a wall, right? So how do you lean into the fear that comes with a pivot or use the fear as a catapult?
Mm, I love this question.
I love this too.
I have a very vivid image of fear being a wall and that wall being platform 9 3/4. Because in order to get on the platform, it's a solid wall and you literally just walk through it and it's magic.
Because you just decide that you're gonna go through it.
And I think that's what it is. Like fear is always there. It doesn't go away. And I think because it's such a heavy, heavy feeling that
Mhm.
it feels really, really solid. And it feels solid like in your brain, it feels solid in your body, right? There's that like
Yeah.
fear. But I think when you just decide and you just go, like, what does Molly Weasley actually say the very first time the kids go through in the first book? I'm pretty sure she says something along the lines of, if you're scared, you better go at a bit of
Y
a run, right?
yeah, best at a bit of a run or something like that,
Yes,
she says. Yes,
yes. Like,
yes.
and that's kind of how it is I think that you know that it's gonna be scary and you go literally head first
And you
anyways.
do it
That
anyway.
Mhm.
Well, I think about that quote, it's usually used on bachelorette parties, but it's like, "Yeah, but did you die?"
Oh.
You know? Where it's like
Mhm.
but it's this thing where it's like fear happens all the time. I think it's about adapting your relationship with fear. With any evolution comes grief because
Mhm.
you have to abandon ideas. You have to be open to things looking different than you originally anticipated. And so I feel like fear can actually be a pretty good tool where if you recognize it, maybe you're like, "Oh, wait, I recognize it. There it is again. That means I have to do it at a bit of a run."
Yes, yes, and then that's what I think is so great about that is tools and, like, you and your brain, patterns are so important because when you can see that that's kind of like your hint when you recognize fear, you're like, "Okay, I know this as a pattern. I know what I need to get through that tool is my bit of a run," or whatever your equivalent of that.
Yeah.
And I also loved what you said using that, quote of, "But did you die?" Because I think one of the things that helps us combat fear is our own belief in ourself that we can, and so looking back, like, we're in our 30s. There's a
Yeah.
lot of times we were afraid and we have made it through every single time. And so that helps
Mhm.
you know and builds your belief that even when I'm scared, I can do something. But this also makes me think of something I just wrote in my journal a couple days ago where I was talking about the idea of just risk in general and taking risk.
Mhm.
And I was thinking about people have said to me many times, like, how were you willing to take that risk? And I was reflecting, thinking, there have been few times in my life where I felt like I've made risky decisions.
Yeah.
And I realized the difference is a risk is completely perspective. And if I believe that I'm going to be getting my result enough, I don't perceive it as a risk. It doesn't seem risky to me at all. In fact, it seems like the smartest decision I could make. And
Yeah.
then having that belief kind of takes away the fear, then the wall that's there. And that I think that also helps like get you through. So if you can really see that the other end is possible or whatever the risk is or whatever you're fearing, like I guess moving to New York is one of the things like financially my husband quit his job and so there's a risk in
Yeah.
financially him quitting his job, but we believe so much in his success that's coming that it doesn't really feel risky, if that makes sense.
That does make sense because I think what's coming up for me is like fear is it's just a feeling, right? And fear is there because there's unknowing, there's
Mhm.
newness, and there is movement forward that has to happen where it's like I know I haven't done this before. It's really just the unknowing. But if you habitualize being like, yeah, but that's just what new shit is. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's just you just don't know, but you get to know, and for you specifically, I mean, you made a massive pivot last
Mhm.
year. You made ma
Oh,
and I remember you were
mhm.
literally here, and I saw
Yes.
you kind of wearing it, and then you told me, you're like, "Yeah, I wanna start coaches college, like, I just really think I"
Mhm.
and, you didn't say it like that, obviously, but you were
Yeah.
like, "I need it," and it's like, "Then do it." You I think I saw you 2 days later, you'd already started.
And it was, like, done. Yes, yeah. And I think well, there's a big part of honesty that had to come with that for myself of what I
Mhm,
truly wanted, and when we are talking pivoting, I think this is what happens a lot. I think people need to pivot because they weren't honest in the beginning and or what is honest to them has evolved, right? And
yeah,
so and I think there's a lot of layers to this. I was just talking in coaches college to my coaches about this where and it was about the idea of coaching other people in their honesty. My coach coached me to work on my health coaching company, of course, because I was asking her for help with that because that's what I thought I wanted at the time. But it was because there was another layer of me on the back end, like not being
mhm,
honest with myself. Therefore, I couldn't be honest with my coach to get coaching on where I needed to move forward until the day it hit me. And I was like, hey, I don't think I want to be a health coach. And I actually know that I haven't wanted to be a health coach for a long time. And I just haven't admitted it to myself. Therefore, I haven't been able to admit it to you. Therefore, I haven't been able to take action on it. And so for me, there was that huge layer of honesty, and it was moving here and seeing John be so honest with himself and having that as a model for me that was like, yeah, what you're doing is 60% of the way to your purpose, you know?
mhm.
Yeah.
I also just don't think that if your honesty with yourself doesn't have its own evolution, then you're stagnant.
Yeah, you're a
Like,
little bit stale.
little
A little
stale,
stale. I'm
little
a little
little
awkward
stale, bro.
saltine cracker.
But it is so true, but to admit that
Mhm.
things do change, that's just scary because then you
Yeah.
know more is gonna change, so it's like this fear that I feel because I'm gonna do this new thing,
Mhm.
I know I'm gonna have to feel it again because once you feel it once, you're gonna have to keep feeling it.
And I think the thing that comes up so much, and I didn't necessarily feel this with Whole You, but I was just coaching one of my coaches on this, is she's doing a pivot and she's like, I feel like everyone's going to see everything that I have successfully done so far now. And that as I change, everyone's going to call me a failure. They're going to think that didn't work. And so I think that's another thing, really, too, when you think about pivoting and changing, is we have this perception of what other people think. And I said,
Yeah.
"Honestly, truthfully, tell me, what did you think when I pivoted away from Whole You into Coaches College?" And she was like, "Well, I was just curious." And I said, "Do you think there's the possibility other people would just be curious?" And then she's like, "Yes." And I said, "And everything you described to me in your reason for," and let me just tell you what she's fucking creating.
Yeah,
She's pivoting to create an empowerment program for junior and senior high school girls so that they can be literally ready for the world. And I was like, when you describe to people what you're passionate about and tell them how you're about to go change the lives of junior and senior girls everywhere, there's not going to be a single soul on the planet that's like, once they're curious about why you're doing it, thinks, oh, yeah, she's just a failure. They're going to be like, oh my God, how can I help you do
how
this
can I help
cause?
you? Yeah, and also, like,
Yeah.
how do we get our girls this? Like, how do we get our
Mhm.
young women these resources?
Yeah. But can you think about, like, if that fear overtook her of other people thinking she failed at, like, her past endeavor, which she's not, she was so successful in her 2 careers before this, that it would stop her from creating that. So, pivoting
Mm,
is so important, and as you see, like, your honest passions in the world and your purpose in the world evolve, we have to pivot to follow that to continue to do our purpose in the world. Like, if you think
yeah,
about this woman who's doing that, it's so important, and like you said, if we all stay stale saltine crackers, it means we're not growing, which means that you're not taking all of your experiences and compiling for the betterment of yourself and everyone around you either.
totally. Like,
Mhm,
100%, and that anecdote resonates so hard because
mhm,
I was committed to acting for so long,
mhm,
and every time I expanded, when I expanded into writing, producing, consulting, like, when I moved into all of these spaces, every single time, without question, I was always hit with a question by someone, "Oh, so you gave up acting then?"
mhm,
And it's like, "No," and I had to face that fear so many
mhm,
times because that little Kate inside of me is screaming, "No, we're an actor." And I love acting. There's no possible world in which I will ever abandon it. But I was growing and I needed more areas to put my creative brain and to put my creativity.
Mhm.
And if I had not started that trajectory, I would not have made Me
Yeah,
Free.
I
And
know.
and it's a or this podcast, and it's a
Mhm,
resource I really think that people need, and it's already helping so many people, and it makes me feel so good. And even when I was consulting, I realized how quickly I had hit a ceiling where I was like,
mhm,
"Okay, so I'm actually quite limited here." So I'm only limited to the hours I have in a day. I'm only limited to a certain amount of clients because I can't make up more hours. And what am
mhm.
I gonna do? Like double the price of like everything I'm doing for everyone else? Like I was like, how do I do this on a bigger scale in a
Scale.
way that it doesn't take over my whole life? Because I have so many other things to do, but I also
Mhm,
really want to share myself in this way with people. So I have to do the scary
mhm.
thing and do it. And then we launched and
Here we are.
yeah, it's exciting.
It's out in the world. Yeah. Bow, 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 bow.
Okay. What does ready to pivot or adapt look like? And how do we give ourselves grace for change?
Hmm.
My first thought on this is that it looks however it needs to look for you.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, is I think one of the things that we do in this world, and I am a type A color coded plan it all out type of person. Give me a checklist. I will check it all off. But I think the more that I experience life, the more that it's just more fluid than that. And it would be so nice to have a very specific checklist of these are all the things that are showing me this. And if I see all five of these signs, it means I'm going to react in this way, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think that this active pivot is that as much as, the things would be a little bit more vague of how they would look. Like, I think
Mm,
one, like we already touched on, is honesty. Where is the honesty? How honest are you with yourself? And do you need to have like a little honesty journaling session for a couple weeks?
yeah.
Are you really telling yourself every day? Are you having to convince yourself every day that you love something? Are you telling yourself you love something, or do you just feel like you love it?
Ooh,
You
are you
know?
just saying you loved it? Or you love it because you used to?
Exactly. Are you not allowing for that change? So I think awareness is the biggest thing, and I think honesty is part of it, and I think the hints that lead at honesty are the forcing, the should, the staleness, the happiness, relative happiness factor, like
Mhm.
how high is it, how low is it, your
Yeah.
energy. I think energy is a big sign for a lot of people, but yeah, I think it's honest answers to those things. Like even thinking about I don't think the listeners know this, but John is my second marriage. I was married before John, and I just remember the moment of honesty with myself about that relationship and being like, "Oh,
Mm,
I've just been lying to myself about what I think I should have this entire time. Like, I think I should have a family that looks like this. I should have a family that does this. I should be with the guy marry the guy you've been with for this amount of time. You should marry the guy who can provide for you, blah, 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 blah." Right? You shouldn't be fighting in a relationship and all these things. That was one of the things I remember I hung my hat on. I was like, we never fight. And now looking back, I'm like, yeah, because we had zero passion and we almost never talked. I was like, of course we're not fighting. So I think, there's so many like shoulds that get in the way, and you have to just really honestly inspect yourself. And maybe that means you don't pivot at all, right? Maybe you're like, oh,
true.
honestly, I do really like this, and my should is telling me I shouldn't pivot.
See, should is such a trap, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
Should is the biggest trap, and with changing, with moving forward, with, adapting your circumstances or whatever it is that you're trying to pivot and adapt and evolve with, whatever evolution you're actively seeking, I think that the pivot and the adaptation actually looks like you knowing how you want to feel and then allowing the
Mhm.
pivot, the actions of the pivot or the adaptation to have patience to let them tell you and show you what it looks like, what the
Mhm.
steps look like. Because we can do all the actions we want, but it's not like you can't do like hard points, I guess is what I'm saying, without knowing how you want to feel about it.
Yes.
So I think it's be graceful with yourself, be kind to yourself, be compassionate with yourself along the way, but know that you are seeking these feelings.
Mhm.
I want to make this pivot and do X, Y, and Z because I want to feel empowered. I want to feel like I help people. I want
Mhm.
to feel intellectually stimulated every single day. Like
Yeah.
part of consulting for me, I was like, oh my gosh, I get to talk to creatives all the time.
Mhm. So good.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yes.
Just like,
Yes.
yeah, explore your brain space with me. That is my
Mhm.
favorite thing. It's basically my love language. I swear.
I think the stickier half of this is not knowing and deciding and seeing the sign to pivot, though. I think the stickier half of that question is how do you give yourself grace?
How do you give yourself grace?
And I think for me, that that's been something in like the last like 3 years or so. This idea of grace and compassion has been something I've really, really practiced. And I think for me, the first step has been normalizing it and just being like, you're a human. Humans change their
Mm,
mind, humans grow their skills, humans do things differently. And I think that that has always really helped. And that's, I remember there's so many times where I'd like feel frustrated or angry or upset that I was making a decision, or I mean, those feel really deep. I don't often get really angry, but maybe like frustrated or disappointed. And I just remember my coach being like, "Welcome to the human experience, Kayla." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm not a robot. That is so right."
yeah.
And but then also on the reverse side, I think something else too, when I think about a lot of the pivots that I've made or that I've watched people make, is also doing it in a way that feels like you said, you have a feeling that you want at the end result.
Yes.
And I also think that giving yourself grace means also depicting how do you want to feel through the progression of the pivot, right? You
Mhm.
can pivot hard, like John and I did, quit your job, move across the country, right? In a
Yes.
very short amount of time. Like we
Mhm.
accomplished that in a very short amount of time. And there were also other things that we did that set us up for success, right? There were things like financially, we wanted to feel secure as we went through this. And so we're like, okay, we are going to make sure that we have this amount of money sitting so we can pay for rent for a year in New York, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
that is almost like a solid, tangible way to give yourself grace because it allowed us to have a certain feeling along the way. So I do think, and maybe it's that type A checklist, color coded planner in me that is like part of giving myself grace is allowing myself the preparation to feel the way I want to when it happens, if that makes sense.
It makes so much sense because the sentence in my head right now is you need to have boundaries in your acts of service to yourself.
Yeah.
So, and that's okay for you to say, we are going to hard pivot.
Mhm,
Great. How do we hard pivot? We
mhm.
have a savings account that we know we're safe.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you build your boundaries and how do you create your safety
Mhm.
within your own ability to give yourself grace while you're pivoting and you're adapting and changing? Because I think about so many people who want career shifts, like massive career shifts.
Mhm.
You have to have some, not fail safes, but I think you just need some handles to hold on to.
Yeah, it all depends on what is the reassurance that you need along the way. Like for me, financial security, that feels really good. For I think that's a lot of things that a lot of people think when they pivot.
Mhm.
But it could be also one of the other things for me too though is we could have pivoted slower and had way more financial security. Like we could
Mhm.
have waited for more of John's stock to vest. We could have had him finish out an entire like if we would have waited 6 more months, we could have intentionally saved thousands of more dollars, right?
Yeah.
But for me, also part of how I wanna feel is I like to make fast decisions. I don't like to sit on something and take 3 years to do it. That's definite 3 year that's like I don't even consider that making a decision. Like, when we first started talking about moving, and I was like, "When do you think we do this?" And a couple years ago, then we're not talking about it. Like, I don't wanna talk about it until we are, like, under a year because for me, when I make a decision, the way I like to do it is to start taking actions
Yeah.
toward that because I get excited. So it would have also been not a good decision. I wouldn't have been giving myself grace or I wouldn't have been setting myself up to feel good if I would have said, "Okay, let's plan this for 3 years from now."
Mhm.
You know? So I think all of those things we need to look at ourselves and say, "What do I specifically need in order to make this happen?" And give yourself, like you said, what the boundaries of like literal boundaries around you of how is this gonna look?
Well, think about any ride you take, literally any ride in a car, on a, whatever, you have a seatbelt.
Mhm,
Or on, I think of a roller coaster where you have handles sometimes. It's like any ride you take, any momentum requires you to hang on at some point.
mhm. Yeah.
And so it's like if it's financial stability, if it's having the person who you trust the most in the world being by your side during it, or
Mhm.
it can even be as small as I'm going to make this change in my career. I'm going to move to this next thing. As long as I can have morning coffee at my favorite coffee shop and sit there for 20 minutes and read the news every day, I know I'm okay.
That could be
I
your
think
handle.
honestly, yeah, that can be your handle. Write the rules to your own board game of you. And
Yes.
I think
Mhm.
also that is the empowerment where it's like, you have to realize the one writing the rules is you.
I just had such a good idea.
I'm ready.
You should make, I don't know if you wanna put this, you might edit this out, but you
Okay.
should make Part of Me 3 where they end with a board game, where they write
Like,
a board game
of themselves.
of themselves.
Honestly,
That's cool.
wait, that's great. I have no idea if I will edit this out or not, but that is a great, great idea.
Yeah, that would be so fun, and it's all creative people.
As someone who's in blockchain, you know,
Mhm.
that would be the wildest thing for someone like that to do, but you came to me to optimize your creative thinking,
Mhm.
so try it.
Or maybe it's just like a special thing you do for a month, like, out of one of your, like, month special things, you're like, "This month, this
Yeah.
is the activity and way that we're reflecting on ourselves." Like, that could be so fun.
That could be so, so fun. Oh, wait, I love that. I love that. Okay, this is a question I'm really excited about. So, what advice are you gonna give to someone, or what strategies will you give someone who struggles with embracing change, especially when it's forced?
Mm, forced change. Like,
Forced change.
if somebody's job and everybody downsizes around, so all of a sudden they have to take on the duties of 2 other people, or they live in a military family and they're a teenager and they have to move because their dad
Mhm.
has to move. Like, I'm thinking of
Yeah.
forced change and what it could be.
I'm thinking of, your lease is up, we're raising the rent, you can't afford it, you have to go. So it's like situations like that, forced change. I think a really powerful tool in that too, one would be allowing yourself to actually grieve
Mhm,
what is being changed, but then also realizing that your internal compass is the strongest compass you have because you'll never have access to anyone else's internal compass. And things work out for you. So how is this opportunity that has just presented itself, how actually is it the best thing for you? So give
mhm.
yourself the moment to be like, this sucks. I hate this. I hate this. And then move to, but how is this the best thing for me right now? How am
Yeah.
I going to make this the best thing for me?
I agree. I agree that the first part is definitely grief. And I will say, as somebody who, like I said, I've been working on compassion, that used to be the step that I would always skip and I'd go straight to, "Oh, but I can make this wonderful." And I really think that when you think about forced anything, it really boils down to, what is your general outlook on life? And what do
Ooh,
you generally want your outlook to be like? Do you generally want to be the person who doubts a lot, that looks for the worst in things, that only focuses on how things are hard?
yeah.
Or do you want to be the person who makes the best out of the scenario or does find growth everywhere? And that is a choice, and there's no right answer, like, at
Mhm.
all. If It just depends on how you want to see things and work through things. But that's what I feel like needs to be analyzed first in order to decide how you would respond. I think it's deeper than just a scenario of forced change. It's, how do you want to look at life?
Yeah. How do you want to look at your own life? What kind
Mhm,
of, how active do you want to be in your own life? I mean, this now just takes me to Me 3. And for listeners who are not aware, Kayla is who built the curriculum of Me 3. And so I think about this where the entire point of Me 3 is to optimize your creative thinking, but it's to do it in a way by you being
mhm,
prompted to self-analyze yourself and
mhm.
self-define yourself. It's
Yes.
not, the method is not, my method is not take my method at word. My method is listen to my method and what comes up for you and what are you going to do about it?
Mhm.
That self-reflective thing. So I think it is really important when having to start to embrace change. It's like, what are your opinions on it actually? And
Mhm.
I don't think just thinking about it is enough. It's like, what's your practice of actually putting these thoughts down? Do you write
Yes.
them out? Do you record them? What do you do to make them real? Because there has to be some sort of ceremony around making intangible tangible for yourself
Mhm.
because it makes it just what, like 6 levels more real? That's a made
Mhm.
up number, but
I like it. I like
yeah,
it.
thanks.
Well, and I think yeah, that's exactly it. Like, you get to determine because even the way you said that, even though I completely agree with you and, like, your style is to say, "How could this be the best for me?" My style is, "How can I learn from this?" And
Yeah.
you probably come up with, like, the same answer, but it's still how I ask it that helps
Mhm.
my brain pick out what I need to out of it. So, I like to look at life like a science experiment. I would be like, "All right, social experiment 5,678. Here we go." And I'd be like, "What am I going to learn and adapt from this? How can I then make me a better person, grow my brain, and how?" And especially in the work that I'm in now, I'm like, "How can I apply this to everybody I'm coaching's life?" You know?
But that is the addictive nature that you and I have to
Mhm.
knowledge. We
Mhm.
love learning. We love knowledge, we love learning,
Mhm.
and, like, one of my favorite areas to learn about is learning about myself
Mhm.
because no one else ever gets to at the level I do, and I love being with people. I love, like I said earlier, like, thinking and learning. I love expanding and exploring, but it is the best to do when I know all the tools in the toolbox
Yes,
because
yeah.
a hammer accomplishes what a hammer accomplishes, but there are mallets too, and maybe there's a better tool for that job.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and I'm just, like, thinking my brain is just giving me all these different examples of the way different people would approach this, so, like, you approach it in your way, I approach it in my science experiment learning way, you have your tools, well, everybody has tools, and all the tools look different, but then I think about somebody who maybe has this strong athletic background, and they're like, "Okay, if this forced change were a game and, like, they just scored 18 points, like, that's out of like, what am I gonna do about it?" Right? Like,
Mhm,
how am I gonna play this game? Maybe they would look at it in that way, or like John who makes music. Maybe there's a way that he would see it from like, okay, if I were to, these are the types of skills that I use in terms of perseverance, or when something gets hard in the studio, I can apply that here. And so our
mhm,
tools come from such of our experience, but also I think it's really interesting. The command of the tool, the name of the tool will come from our experience and what is comfortable for us. So, like me, it's my science experiment and my data.
yeah.
Like a athlete could like gamify it, right? So,
Yes,
and that's the difference between the hammer and the mallet, right?
but I guarantee you every single time you conduct your equivalent, your science experiment, whenever you do that,
Mhm.
you gain a new tool at the end,
Oh
and
yeah,
that is exciting because I
or
love having
refine
more
one.
tools.
Mhm.
Yeah. My growing up, my dad would always say to me, he would, like, do this challenge with me where if I needed something, he would say, "Stop. Is the tool within reaching distance?" And I would look, and sometimes I could find something within reaching distance to use as that tool, just use it in a different way. And so he really
Mm.
always gave me this idea where I'm like, "Yeah, okay, well, this is meant to be this, but what else can it be?"
Okay, Steve. Wow, that's
No.
like blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Is
It
the
well,
tool within
what is the tool
distance?
within reaching distance? And more often
Yeah.
than not, the tool within reaching distance was something it was usually like a bottle opener or something. That
Mhm.
was our favorite one to find because it's like you can make leverage with anything.
Yeah,
You know,
that thing's
you
got
can
like tick, 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 tick. Yeah.
it's like that's the easiest one that always comes to mind. But when I look at things, I'm like, "Oh, this is that, but it is also." It's fun.
Mm. Yeah, I love that idea. And I think that also goes back to kind of like personalizing your approach to you because the things that are going to be in the closest distance or to you are the things that you are highly skilled at. Like even
Mm.
thinking about this is gonna be an example that's kind of, like, off this topic, but lately I've been thinking about well, not lately, I think all the time about posting on social media, and
Oh, yeah.
because that's largely part of my job, right? And so, I think about there will be times where I'm getting ready to go post on social media, and so often I try to reach for the tool that's so far away and do something that, like, a graphic designer would do or something
Mm,
that is not literally in my nearness. And it distracts me so much from my purpose of wanting to post this, my great idea, the story I want to tell. And then all of a sudden I'm somewhere else and I get really frustrated and I go away. And it's like, I've been telling myself basically use the tool that's nearest to me, which is my skill. What am I good at? That's why the other day my post was my doodle because I'm like, I doodle at all times. I've been writing since we've been here, right?
mhm.
And as a teacher, that was like a lot of what I did. And I was like, you know what? Just doodle. And it was perfect.
I think you said this to me the other day. Simple, I feel like simplifying, like the simplification of everything is like the key to communicating it. Simple is clear,
Mhm.
and I think simple is usually well, especially for people like us who are highly intelligent people
Mm,
who thrive on being we love that part of ourselves, right?
mhm.
I genuinely hope in the world everyone has that feeling. But we love being intelligent. We love using our brains. So, wait, I'm losing the
Well,
thought.
no, I know exactly where you're going. Where
Okay.
when you have, like, these bigger thoughts or sometimes even, like, robust
Mhm.
vocabularies, not all the time is everybody following or how fast a conversation first might go, and
Correct.
simplifying that allows for that, and it's also, I think, a lot of artists and creatives, it's the same thing too, where a lot of times you feel not understood or something, and just think about the way a lot of, artists and creatives speak, it's very poetic. It's very,
Mhm.
deeper meaning and layers and things like that, and it's like, the layman is like, "What does this mean? I don't know what you said." And so,
Yeah.
like, sometimes it needs to be simplified for a lot of people, especially, like, mass scale of people, Gen Pop,
Mhm.
to see it,
I
hear it.
think also it's like if you want to make it digestible, if you want it to have a bigger reach, it does have to be simple because for me, you and I know each other super well. So you speak
Mm,
Kate and I speak Kayla.
mhm,
So we there that's like that's an intimate rapport. That is a
mhm.
special thing to have. But when you're talking about like this level, I don't want to call it performance, but this level of offering your own language out to a massive scale of people, you do have to adapt the language a little bit so that it is digestible for the other person.
Well, and it makes me think of teaching to begin with. It's not that you ever get rid of that language. It's what I would call like the guided release of responsibility. Like in the very beginning, for
Mhm.
somebody who doesn't understand your language, you get like a small, simple entry point, and then
Yeah.
you slowly guide them through understanding until they can understand independently on their own. And by that time, they're like inside your world all the way and they know.
Yeah.
And it'd be like you wouldn't do that with Chinese. You wouldn't just start speaking Chinese to someone. You'd be like, here are the first words, right?
Yes, it's like, let's learn colors or numbers, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then to put it into practice to actually understand it. Okay, my earlier thought did come back to me, talking about being highly intellectual, people who enjoy being highly intellectual, or let's
Mhm.
just say, for purposes of this conversation, people who enjoy using this muscle in the noggin, but using it and wanting to, with every single action, do the biggest lift, the biggest flex we possibly can when it is okay to just do a little tiny warm up rep or it's all of equal value. And I
Mm,
know for me, I tend to complicate things because I'm like, oh, but if I make it harder, it'll be like a better puzzle, it'll be like a better maze that I get to figure out.
mhm.
And it's like, that is necessary and great for some things, not all things.
Well, and I think that that's really interesting because I think this is an important discussion. This could even be like pivoting because I think there's this idea in the world that harder, more complex, more working parts, that means it's more advanced or better or smoother or something like that, right? And it's just not always the case, right?
Yeah.
More isn't always better. And so I think that's just something that America kind of
Yes.
what is the saying about Texas? Like, because everything in
Everything's
Texas
bigger
is
in
big, like
Texas.
bigger is better. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's not actually true.
I have a hunch with what you just said. If you had to define what an idea is, what would your definition be?
An idea. Well, I mean, really, truly, it's a thought. What
A
type of
thought.
definition do you want?
No, 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 no. I'm curious because we're talking about ideas, right? And it made me think about when you pivot, when you adapt, the idea has to change, right? So it's like if you
Mhm.
fundamentally broke down, it's like, what is your
So your
reassess
thought
your
has to change.
so your thought has to change, right? So it's like,
Mhm.
it's just a new idea. Like
Mhm.
demystify it, debunk the scary in it, and just
Yeah.
de-scary it.
Well, all of life is just thoughts,
All of life is just thoughts, and there
which
are
what makes
always
it so
going,
hard.
which is but so beautiful at the same time.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
exactly. Mhm,
Okay, I guess, that's a fun theme to practice where it's like, yeah, I know the definition dictionary, but
mhm,
someone wrote that dictionary. So, what is your writing to this word? Because once you define it for yourself, even if it's as small as a word like idea, it actually might help you a lot, and it might help you make that concept more malleable for yourself and just
mm,
personalize everything. You know, when
yeah,
we're kids, we write our names on everything. It's like the most
mhm,
fun thing we can do as soon as we learn how to write our name. And it's like just write your name on every word, every idea, every thought. Just make sure your name's written on it for you when you use it.
I love that, especially as, like, creators, and when I think about, like, one of my favorite things about helping you create Me 3 is that that is exactly what you did, and I think more highly passionate and highly thoughtful people need to share their thoughts with the world, and the reason why I say highly passionate and highly thoughtful is because those are usually the people that have the pull to share but think they shouldn't. I think everybody's thoughts are super, super valid, and I think that we can learn and grow from everybody's thoughts because everybody's insight and perspective is something new, and I really think perspective taking is something we don't have enough of. It's what makes us not understand other people. Like, I think
Mhm.
being lacking taking perspective is, like, the at the root of, like, things like racism and stuff and sexism and all of
Yeah.
that. Like, it's all about understanding and respecting perspective, and we just need more of it in the world because a lot of the perspectives are limited of what we get, and I just love that you said that. You're like, "Put your perspective on it, and then I just think you should also share it."
Yeah, and even if it's not for you to share on massive scales, even if it's just constantly be reassessing, "Do I like this? How do I feel
Mhm.
about
Yeah.
this? What does
Mhm.
this mean to me?" For
Mhm.
sure. We all have a language that we all agree upon, and that's how we communicate with each other, but we also have our individual own ones, and
Mhm.
we are the writers of said language, so we can make it work for us in a way that, like, puts our brain at more ease, puts our brain in a better place to work for
Mhm.
us, and makes us feel the feelings we wanna feel.
Yes. Yeah, like the exact words again, like, even saying going into a forced situation, the thing that makes me feel the best is to say, "What can I learn?" Very specifically, those are my words, and,
Yeah.
like, your words are, "How could this be the best?" Right? Even if
Yeah.
they get us the same result, the different words that we put our names on that matter for
Mhm.
us, the phrases that matter for us, we
Yeah,
need to know them. Yeah, I
and
love
that's
that. Write
and
your
that's my
manual.
write your manual. Thank it
Shout out
that
3.
shout out me 3. No, it is write your own manual because that's my method of approach to creative thinking.
Mhm.
I just wanna help you do that. Just make it the best for you, best user experience,
Yeah, yeah,
you know? Yeah.
exactly. Mm.
Okay. Oh, these are so good. Oh my gosh. Okay, these are amazing questions. We're not gonna get to all of them, but
Okay,
we
we'll try to
can
answer faster.
yeah, we'll noodle on some more. What kind of strategies do you practice to make pivoting positive as opposed to negative? I think that's kind of what we just talked about.
Oh, but I also have a very specific strategy that I'll just drop in here that I call
Oh.
growth points, and this is something that I've taught ever since I was teaching elementary school,
Mhm.
and I think of it like this. So often think about taking a test in elementary school. When you do the test, you take a pretest, and let's say it's out of 100 just for ease, and you get back the pretest, which is before you ever even learned the information, you get 10 out of 100. And what is your first response? I fucking failed and I fucking suck.
I
And then
hated
you
when they
go
did those tests.
right? And then
Yeah.
you go through and you go through the test or you go through the unit and on the back end you take the test and you get a 70 out of 100 and you're like, "Well shit, I still only got a C. I'm an idiot," right? And you still feel bad. When I graded tests and gave those tests because I was required to give them, and if you do pretest right, which so many people don't, they are supposed to inform how you teach. So you see where everybody got the low scores and what everybody already knows, and you only teach the stuff
Mm.
people don't know, right? You focus on that
Yeah.
with them. But I never, ever graded my kids 10 out of 100 or 70 out of 100. I would say plus 10. And I taught them that this is plus 10 growth points. You knew 10 things. There were 10 points of knowledge on here. And then afterwards, they got plus 70, right? And they're like, oh my God, look at the difference between set 10 and 70. You grew 60. That's all my students saw was they grew 60 instead of thinking, oh my God, I need 30 more to get to 100. When we look at life and we look at what we're going through, so often we're just looking at where we are to the finish and we only see what we don't have and we never focus. Like, and I don't say words like always and never, but we really never focus. And I have to actively practice this still, even though I've been teaching this for 15 years, right?
Mhm.
We hardly ever focus on the things that we've accomplished. Once we accomplish when we go from 10 to 11, we don't regard that. We
Yeah.
disregard that completely. Even when we go from 10 to 20, we disregard that completely because all of a sudden we want to get from 20 to 30. And so growth points are looking at every single thing and celebrating it the entire way that you go. Every small point, every part, every decision, every time you woke up and you were scared and you had to remind yourself that you believe, and everything like that along the way matters. And we
Mm.
need to consider that. So that's what I think helps build that positive momentum as you go, is if you're paying attention to all of your growth points.
So my version of that is evidence. Where
Yeah.
it's like you define what your evidence looks like and you check in with your evidence every single time, the universal wink, where it's like, I am now habitualizing, seeing evidence of positivity and my growth
Mhm.
and things working out for me the way that I'm intending to constantly. The train
Mhm.
arrives on time. As soon as I walk down the
Mhm.
steps and the L just get, I am like, I, who could mess
Yes,
with me?
love.
Who
And
could
but I
do?
think
Yeah,
what's important is even those really small things.
you got to count them.
Mhm.
You
Yes.
have to count them. Or it's like friends getting super hyped about the podcast and talking about it's like
Mhm.
it can be massive too. It could also just be like a high paying client. Like it can be the
Mhm.
whole scale, but it's like don't forget about all the evidence of all the growth
Mhm.
points that you're making because they are all contributing to the success. It's like writing thank you notes. I love thank you notes. It's like at
Mhm.
Christmas you write all your thank you notes to everybody.
Mhm.
And it's like write your thank you notes to yourself too,
Mm.
because the way you talk
Yeah.
to yourself and you thank yourself is really
Mhm.
important, and I don't think that people give it enough credit for how much of that information is stored in your body and in your
Yeah.
brain and in your
Mhm.
subconscious, your conscious, your creative conscious. It's
Mhm.
everywhere. A
Yes.
thank you to yourself can be so powerful.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
I do love that. Do you feel like the small daily forced adaptations help you to better prepare yourself for larger, more rigorous lifestyle adaptations? And if so, in what way?
What is a daily forced adaptation versus is this a perspective? Like, my first thought is, I don't force myself to do anything on the daily, I choose.
Yes, I agree with you.
So but the rest of the question was, yeah, they absolutely helped build me for the big change later.
Yeah, they do, and I think also I think the first shift there then is, well, why is it forced?
Yeah. Why are we
Why
viewing it that way?
why aren't we excited by the change? I love change. It's
I
so
also
exciting.
well, I think force maybe this is where this comes from, and because we can't, like, ask the person who submitted this, but I think we often think we have to do things. And I think there's two parts to this. So, like, think about somebody who wants to lose weight. They're like, well, in order to lose weight, I have to start running every day, right? Or in order to lose weight, I have to quit eating cookies every day, right? We just
Mm,
think there are things that we have to do. And so, therefore, they are forced things we have to do to get our result. And I think what happens is when we say we have an idea and we want to get somewhere, we only see one path, and I think that's what's problematic, and that's what makes you feel like there are forced things to do to get
yeah,
there. I think what you need to do, you as in listener, person who asked this question, is ask yourself, "How do I want to get there?" And then you won't feel like it's forced every day. Because if
mhm,
my truth is that I want to save a year's salary in order to move to New York, then I'm not forced to not shop. I am excited to not shop. I am choosing to not shop because I want
mm,
to save that money. And so I think telling yourself I have to do these things to get to my goal sucks. Like, they should be
yeah,
things that you are flipping your mind to say, I want to do this action. I'm choosing to do this action. And if
mhm.
it's something you actually really truly hate, then you need to choose a different path and different action to get there.
That was loaded in the best way
Yeah.
because I'm thinking, so what is a perspective shift for someone who is in a 9 to 5 that
Mhm.
works for some corporate company or not, you know what I mean? And there's a reorg, or if they're told, "Hey, you now have this responsibility," or, "Hey, you just lost this responsibility." Because there's a big difference between the feeling of something happening for you and something happening to you.
Mhm. I
But I
just
still
coached
think
someone through this
really,
exact
because
situation.
I think there's so much room for you to change your perspective on it and for you to have I still feel like and this is what I want people who are in 9 to 5s who are part of me 3 to take away. It's like even if your instructions are handed to you in your work because you and I are 2 entrepreneurs, we work for
Mhm.
ourselves. So it's like if you work for other people, if you don't want to be your own boss, how can you still have the most creative thoughts within that framework that someone else has given to you? Where is the room for you in the role you're given?
Yes. And so the person that I've been coaching through with this, that is what we've been working on for her is like, okay, well, and her goal is she is quitting her 9 to 5. She is quitting her corporate job and she will be going full time in her business, which I've helped her kind of go through the process of being like, where do my passions lie? What do I want that business to look like? And we've developed that, which has been really fun. And then she's also working with John to do like all of her world building. So it's been a really, really fun project
Amazing.
for us to work on together. But while she's still in her 9 to 5, because financial security is one of the things that she does
Mhm,
want, and we're one viewing her job differently. It is now the job, it is now those actions are not that she's giving them to someone else. She's giving these actions to herself because this is how she's earning her financial security. Like this is how she's creating money, right, for her business. This is how she's funding her
mhm,
dream. So that is her first thing. The other thing we looked at and we said, okay, when you are your own boss and when you are having this own business, what will you be doing when you interact with other people? What are the skills that you need? A lot of them, because her skill set has come from working in this job. A lot of those things do still exist in the job she's in. So now we can look
mhm.
at them differently and say, oh, this is like a paid internship to make me really fucking good at these skills so that when I go have
Yeah,
my own business, I'm like cream of the crop. Also, practicing things like networking, running a team. If your desire is to be your own boss, how would you be the boss of yourself in that position? How would you be checking in with yourself? How would you be doing your weekly, quarterly reviews with yourself so that when you get out, you know how to do it? You can apply all of that right now. And that's one of my favorite things when I coach people through.
mhm.
Had the realization this last week. I've coached a lot of people through going full time with their dreams.
Look at you out
Um,
here just casually changing lives.
but I think looking at it like a paid internship where you get to hone and explore, and like if you have these skills you're going to be using when you're solo on your own, hone
Mhm.
them right now. Like it's literally a paid internship to do that. And so I think again, that's a perspective shift, but that one's also really tangible and gives you takeaways that actually matter when you are on your own.
Your what can I learn?
Mhm. Oh, there you go. There it came back.
Yeah. Hey, I'm dropping my dad again. Steve's coming up again. Steve always said, even when I had jobs working at a hair salon or I had a job working at like a pottery studio, like I had all these different jobs. And he would always say, like, what can you learn from them? If the
Mm,
place is working, if the system is working, what are you going to learn from there? Like, even when my cousin got his first job at Home Depot, we were like, what are you learning there? That is a massive building. That is a
mhm.
massive corporation. That is a like that inventory is insane. What do you get to learn there? Like they're how do you how do you excitify? You know what I
Ooh,
mean?
that's way more fun than gamify to me. I would rather
Yeah,
Excitify something than
excitify.
gamify it.
Oh, trademark. Look at me. Oh,
Trademark.
trademark. I've become such a trademark copyright hoe since starting my own businesses. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. um, but yeah, I think that's how do you excitify it for yourself? Like, how
Mhm.
is it actually working for you? Because you need, and also, why am I practicing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I here? You're here for financial security. So you are
Mhm.
getting that. Right.
Yes.
And so it's like, so how do you make it the best experience for you there? I
Mhm.
really, I'm always afraid to go too woo woo, but like
Mhm.
it is a really interesting idea to think about abstractly what is in your control because it's just your mind. You
Mhm.
know, it's like, how do I make this work for me? And it's so hard, especially with like a reorganization when one person absorbs two jobs. It's like,
Yeah,
how do you possibly like that's a massive, massive feat. Like that
it
is a
is. Mhm.
big, big mountain to climb. But how are you going to climb it in a way that actually makes you better?
Mhm. Yeah, and I remember and John did the same thing, and I think there's so many other tangible pieces too that if, we could talk directly to this person that we could ask more questions and learn a little bit more, but there's usually a lot of, like, boundary setting things that matter and that can be really
Mm.
beneficial, which also then are really helpful when you start your own business because boundaries get way harder, not whoever tells you having your own business is like super easy time freedom. Da, da, da. No, every entrepreneur very first starts working more hours for themselves than they did for someone else to begin
If anyone ever says that,
with. So
I
practice your boundaries now before you pivot.
before you're always, "What are you practicing right now? What am I practicing right now?"
Mhm. Yeah.
I love that because that's just it's a honing of a skill.
Mhm.
This is good. Honestly, I'm gonna send you a lot of these questions because 'cause they're really fun to think on.
I
They're
love
really,
this.
really fun. This is, as always, just my favorite time with you, always. Thank you so, so, so much, and if anyone else listening has any questions, send them to us. We would love
Oh,
to think on them,
absolutely.
talk
Yes,
about them
please DM
again.
us.
Yeah,
Mhm.
please do. Is it anything still on your brain, on your heart that you wanna say before we stop?
I would say this. The last thing that I would leave people with is if you already have the nudge that you need to pivot, I think that's enough to know that you need to follow it. As somebody who held back on a pivot that she wanted to pivot for 3 years, the other side is so good. It's so good. Like when you align
Mhm.
yourself with what you actually want, like my body physically feels a different passion, like rooted feeling in the earth and in my life because of that. And so if you feel it, I think you should follow it.
I 100% agree, and as someone who has made so many pivots,
Mhm.
it always gets better, and even though I'm working right now the most I've ever worked in my entire life, like hours-wise, it's the most fulfilling.
Mhm. Yeah. It's
So it
beautiful.
is, yeah, and it's worth it. So, it's best if you do it with a little bit of a run at platform and 9 3/4. And that's the latest. I'm honored to have been part of your thinking sphere today. Feel free to share, like, and subscribe on this platform or follow and participate on any of my social media platforms. If this practice intrigues you as much as it does me, then join us in the Me3 community, where we will work directly and you will curate a mindful method of thinking to define your own creative conscious. Thanks for listening to the latest episode of Authenticated. I love that you're here.